I just got to say, following a Navy SEAL and William Wallace could be my dream job, okay? I feel like dropping down and doing push-ups right now because, as some of you may know, my father was the head of the physical education department at West Point for 24 years. His title was the Master of the Sword. And as a Master of the Sword, he was the one who made us all do push-ups and get in shape. So as a plebe at West Point, guess what happened when I got in trouble and the upperclassmen were mad at me? Guess what I had to do? I had to do a lot of push-ups. I went in with the little bony shoulders and everything, and by the end of my freshman year at West Point, they had a little bit more meat to them because of all the push-ups I had to do, because I got in a little bit of trouble while I was there. But look, we've been here for a long time today. A lot of y'all have been listening to a lot of great things going into your head. I want y'all to think about something right now, because we're about ready to enter into the audience participation portion of today, okay? So be prepared. I want y'all to think about the greatest leaders you ever encountered. Maybe people you know, maybe people you work for, maybe people you've seen on movies. William Wallace, right? That's a good one. Think of those people. And think about, what is a leadership trait that that person had that you admired most? Okay, now it's time to yell it out. Anyone? Courage. Courage. What's? Humility. What else? Compassion. Integrity. Generosity. Perseverance. Fairness. Inspiring. Respect. I'm sorry? Consistency, humility. I'm sorry, what was that? Conviction. Teacher. All right, we're going to stop now. We got 800 people here, 700 people here. That's an awesome list. That's a great list. Let me share with you my leadership philosophy. And actually, I call it my leadership philosophy. It's a leadership philosophy my father taught me. And that is that leadership is a blend of competence and character. All right? Leadership is a blend of competence and character. Actually, this is what West Point bases everything that they do on. Because the purpose of West Point is to provide our country with leaders of character for selfless service to our country. All right? Leaders of character for selfless service to our country. Everything we did there was about character. And I want you all to pause right now. And let me ask Amy, how many of the lists on that list had anything to do with competence? 0. I had her taking notes. I had a friend taking notes. None of the things that everybody in this room just shouted out had anything to do with competence or why you follow somebody. Think about that. Yet what do we spend all our time training ourselves on or training people on? It's competencies. Where it's character, why you want to follow people, and why people are going to want to follow you. Now, I mentioned my father being the Master of the Sword, and I know some of you have heard me talk about my boxing stories at West Point. And every plebe at West Point had to take boxing. Well, one of the things that we also had to do was this thing called pugil sticks. So what these were, you put on a lacrosse helmet, and then you would grab this pugil stick. It was a wood, it was almost like a canoe paddle, and they'd wrap towels around it with duct tape. It wasn't that high tech back then. And you would get in a ring, and you'd learn to do your bayonet assault drills against other people. And basically you just beat the snot out of each other. And it was a lot of fun. But the whole point behind this was, and the whole thing I want to talk about is, the point behind both those things, boxing and pugil sticks, was about courage. Teaching us courage. Teaching young leaders courage. And it was not just physical courage, okay? We were all very focused on physical courage at that point. But there's a courage that leaders need to have. And it's a courage that C.S. Lewis talks about. C.S. Lewis, one of my favorite quotes by C.S. Lewis, he said, courage is not just one of the virtues, but the form of every virtue at its testing point. Think about that. Courage is not just one of the virtues, but it's the form of every virtue at its testing point. And so, yeah, West Point was teaching us in those moments physical courage. But they spent so much time working on us as far as the courage of our character. The courage that we need to have to be leaders of character. And how do we make decisions? And you think about it, our character is not really about what happens when everything's going well for us. I mean, we don't really display our true character at that moment. We display our true character at the moment when we're tested. That's the key. When we are tested, what do we do? So I had 3 points I was going to cover today. I'm going to touch on 2 very briefly and then spend a little bit more time on the third. The first thing, when we talk about courage and character, I want you to think about the courage to speak up. Right, the courage to speak up, there's a word called candor. And the definition of candor, some people that I use and I've heard before, is saying what needs to be said, when it needs to be said, and to whom it needs to be said. Okay? I can't tell you the number of times I've worked in organizations where after I've done some training or I've spoken, some people come up and they say, Dave, I've got this issue with my boss, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. But they don't want to speak up about it. They don't want to say anything about it. I just want to say one quick thing about if you're in that situation, and it's a challenging thing, and it challenges us as leaders to have the courage to speak up. If the only time you speak up is when it's good for you, that's marketing, not leadership. All right? You see that? That's marketing, not leadership. And this is talking from an old sales guy here, okay? So I know what marketing is. But the only time you speak up, that's when it's good for you, that's marketing, not leadership. The second thing I want to touch on is trust and the courage to trust. To extend trust to others before they've earned it. There's too many people out there feel like they go to work every day and they have to earn their leader's trust, as opposed to a leader sticking their hand out saying, I trust you. It's a gift I give to you without you earning it from the start. Most people want to be trusted. What if we give somebody something that they want but they don't deserve? They haven't earned it yet, but we give it to them. Guess what? They fight harder to keep that. Do I get burned sometimes when I do that? Yes. But maybe 20% of the time. That means I'm right 80% of the time to trust that person. I'll take those odds to Shreveport and the boats any day. Okay? But the thing I want to focus on right now is courage and accountability. At West Point, there were 4 responses a plebe at West Point could have when an upperclassman asked him a question. Yes, sir. No, sir. No excuse, sir. And sir, I do not understand. Okay? Which of those 4 do you think was hardest for an 18-year-old to answer with? No excuse. Think about that. No excuse, sir. So here's a typical scenario. I oversleep. I'm late for formation. I come down and I'm standing there at attention, and then I get an upperclassman in my face say, Anderson, why are you late for formation? Well, sir, my roommate was supposed to wake me up, and I wasn't able to, and he left before, and no excuse, Anderson. It's not your roommate's fault that you're late. It's not his responsibility to make sure you get places on time. That's your responsibility. You're going to be a leader. You're ultimately responsible for everything that happens. There's no excuse for that. Let's put it in today's terms, maybe even today here in Tyler's terms. I'm sorry I'm late. Traffic on Broadway was terrible. No excuse, Anderson. Traffic on Broadway is always terrible. It's your lack of planning. It's your lack of planning that caused you to be late. You know it takes you 15 minutes to get from your house to here, and you left with 17 minutes to spare. No excuse. How about this one? Oh, well, I'm sorry we didn't get it done, but one of my people didn't do their part of the project. They didn't get that turned in time, so there was a whole cascade of events. No excuse, Anderson. You're the one responsible for that team. This is a result of you not following up on people to make sure that they got the job done that they need to get done, that maybe they didn't understand the expectations and timelines and things. It's not, you can't deflect responsibility for this with this excuse. There's no excuse. Imagine if everybody in your organization stopped making excuses. Imagine what that would be like. What if everybody walked around with the idea, there's no excuse? You know what happens? Productivity happens. Because people don't sit there and say, well, I tried A and B, sorry. Because when people realize from the start they don't have an excuse, guess what they realize? I got to find a way to make this happen. So as opposed to stopping at A and B, they try C, D, E, and F. That's a no excuse attitude. You have to have courage to be able to not make an excuse. So what we're talking about here is the courage of a leader. the courage of character, okay? And finally, when we talk about that, you talk about how West Point trains these leaders. It's all about focusing on our character, and we have to have the courage to do that. I wanted to show you one picture up here of a group of West Point leaders and just tell you one thing. There's my father, the master of the sword. He's going to be here on November 6th. We have the Bright Ideas Conference coming on November 6th. That's sponsored by the Nonprofit Development Center and United Way and Express. And he's going to be coming. We're going to do a tag team, father-son conversation. Hope you all can be there on November 6th. I appreciate the time, and we'll take it on over to the satellite broadcast. Thank you very much.